What was your biggest it I'm doing this moment? Called my wife and told her I had a drinking problem. Hard motherfucking phone call to make, I tell you what. Of course she already knew. Most did. But getting it out there verbally was hard. Real hard. I'd also like to thank Topo Chico Bubbly Water for satisfying my need to drink cold bubbly drinks and need to be holding a beverage urges. Sober and hydrated. 1.5 years. I was a flight nurse at a company who liked firing people. We were transporting a patient from a car accident who became pulseless. Per policy we were meant to go to the closest hospital. Our closest hospital was 9 minutes away. However, this hospital was tiny and couldn't care for our patient. 13 minutes away was a trauma hospital. Our patient was dead and statistically speaking was going to stay that way, but his only hope was the trauma hospital. I told the pilot to go the trauma hospital knowing full well this would be reviewed and I would be fired for violating policy. Fortunately the trauma hospital did a fabulous job and he survived. I was reviewed but not fired. Deploying changes to production on a Friday. Hitting send on an email I wrote my husband's mistress. First off, you have my respect. Second, that sounds a little more like a stop it thing. Followed a girl to another country. Now married 15+ years. I had a choice to eat all the peanut butter cups all at once. I said it. I ate all the peanut butter cups. A few years ago I met a guy on Plenty of Fish, yeah I know. Make fun of me later lol, and we were talking for about a month before he asked me out on a little lunch date. Went on the date, had a great time, and afterwards he asked me if I wanted to go back to his place. Mind you, I was raised very conservatively and also to be essentially scared as hell of guys. My mom always said that guys just want to take girls to their place so they can rape them. Against all of my better judgment, I agreed and we walked back to his place. We had a good time, watched a little bit of TV, and after a couple of hours he walked me back to the diner. I gave me a kiss on the cheek, and we parted ways. We were just married on August 31st of this year. First time I fast roped out of a helicopter. I was just a photographer. Photographed lots of guys going out the back of aircraft over the years, but never jumped or roped myself. One day I was shooting some folks during a week-long training exercise, and they asked if I wanted to make a go of it. No pressure. The guy in charge even told me the aircraft could easily just land if I didn't feel comfortable. But I figured if somebody else can do it, so could I. So I got a few days of training on the tower, and then it was off for the flight. I was nervous as hell, even though they told me it was probably just going to be a 20-foot drop. As we got closer, we started counting down the minutes. At 2 minutes out, the door was opened up. 30 seconds and we unhooked and sat on the floor. It was night out and I couldn't see anything and I was hyped up with nerves and energy. But I also wanted to show myself that I could do it. Remember, the person behind me aid. If you get hurt on the way down, roll to the side as quick as you can. Otherwise I'm landing on you. And that'll just suck. And that was it. The person in front of me was out the door, and the crew chief was slapping me on the back. My feet went over the edge, and the only thing I remembered thinking was it. It was pitch black, but I remember thinking it felt like a longer drop than the tower. I hugged the rope close to my chest and kept my feet kicked out like they told me. Eventually I saw the bottom and landed more or less upright and whole. Even managed to get clear in a few seconds and get video of the next person dropping. Later I found out what was supposed to be a 20-foot top turned into a 50+ foot drop. In the dark I wouldn't have been able to tell, but I'm still proud as hell of myself for doing it. Deciding to go on a solo backpacking trip when I was 18 years old. I'm a worrier and not very good at handling stressful situations, and at the time I was also super introverted. That trip really helped me realize that I'm capable of a lot more than I think. Wasn't sure if a girl I've been chasing for months was giving me signals. She needed to do something in my city and wanted to stay the night. I said sure, but didn't have more than one bed. So to avoid being creepy I offered to sleep on the couch. She hesitated. I offered to both stay in the bed, and she nodded. Cue 2 hours of lying nervously on my side trying not to come off as a predator while trying to make small talk. Eventually I realized we had been cuddling for like an hour and had progressively been getting friendlier and touchier. And at this point I'm just trying to weigh the possibilities. She's just unreasonably friendly versus actually into me, and doing this while trying to be a conversation partner is slowly melting my dumb brain. I figure, I've been single long enough. I lifted her chin and kissed her, giving her plenty of time to recoil and pull away or stop me. She didn't. We've only been together for a bit over 6 months, but she makes me happy. My goal is to make her happy. Asking my now wife if I could call her back the next night after she called looking for a roommate who had moved out. We had talked for a couple of hours that night. She said yes. I called her back the next night. We've been together now 17 years. And got married 2 months ago. Was going through some domestic violence BS and wasn't allowed to leave the home for months at a time. They tried to choke me to death. Yelled at me a lot, etc. I can't remember all of it. My grandmother had died and I'm pretty sure it was the intent to kill me and get my part of the inheritance. The inheritance money finally came in after about 6 months of this treatment, and while the other person took his half and went on vacation, I took my half and bought a Greyhound ticket and got out of there. Best decision I ever made. Bought a sailboat. Quit a decent paying job that I hated. Sailed from New York to the Caribbean where I hung out for a year, then sold the boat back in Florida, and then spent the next 5 months hiking the Appalachian Trail. Went back to work for a year, and now I'm currently backpacking through Southeast Asia for the next 6 months. My friend was being picked on by the bully last week, and I went in. He's fine. I have the black eye. Told a woman how I felt about her while 100% confident she didn't feel the same way. Now married 2.5 years with a beautiful baby girl. Follow your dreams, gentlemen. You never know apparently. Had been playing guitar for like 6 months before leaving for college. I would walk by a music store every day. After half a semester of walking by the store, without thinking about it or planning for it, I actually went in and walked out with a Gibson SG. I've been playing ever since. Skydiving. The plane they take you up in is such a piece of shit. I actually felt safer jumping out of it than landing in it. The way the door shudders as you get to jump altitude didn't help. I wanted out. Drunk texting a girl that used to stalk me because I was thirsty. Instant regret the next day. A few days ago I had the opportunity to get LASIK. I just had to call out of work. This upset my boss, but it 4 days later and I'm already 2020. Proposed to my wife. Was showering and started thinking about how much I love her. Decided, it. I'm marrying this. Got dressed AMD, drove directly to her place to propose. No ring, no fancy speech or atmosphere planned. Thank God she said yes, and 6 years later we are happily married with 2 kids. Entering a mosh pit for the first time. Asking my crush out to a dance in middle school in front of all her friends. And a lot of other kids. She politely declined, but it was a victory for a shy kid like me to even do it. Ate a burger at 10 a.m. this morning. I went to PetSmart and they had a rescue there trying to gain visibility for their adoptable puppies. I was there to get fish food for the class pet at school. I went over just to look at the puppies. Because they're puppies. Holding one. I thought, I wish I could have this puppy. Then I remembered I am an adult and I own my own house. I can get a puppy if I want to. And then I got her. On the spot. Left for fish food. Returned with puppy, Lily, all grown up. Sitting in a terrible apartment. Listening to the upstairs neighbor play fetch with his dog in the house. After waking me up at 4:30 a.m., I'd been searching for a new apartment, but all I could see was my next bad rental, and so I ended up browsing Zillow, and stumbled upon a townhouse in one of my favorite neighborhoods, in my price range, with all the features I wanted. Stared at it for a week, then said, F it, I was going to end up buying a house in a few years, might as well just do it now. Things got kind of chaotic for a few months getting funds sorted and inspections and packing and moving, but I moved in over a year ago and absolutely love the house. In the spring of 2017 I was contacted on OkCupid by an Australian woman in her mid-20s. While she was in Argentina, she said she liked my profile and that she would be in Texas in 2 weeks and wanted to hang out. I agreed, and then 2 weeks later she stood me up. She messaged me that night and apologized and asked if we could try again. I reluctantly agreed. When we got together we hit it off super well. We talked a lot about her travels. She'd been backpacking around South America for 3 months. She told me about how she hadn't really planned the next part of her trip. She just needed to be in San Francisco in 2 weeks to fly home. She wanted to do a road trip from Texas to California but didn't realize how expensive it would be and also didn't know if she'd even be allowed since she didn't have a US license. Earlier that month I had been talking to a friend in San Francisco that wanted me to come visit. I had been saving for a vacation. I own a truck and a mid-smallish sized travel trailer. Campgrounds are cheaper than hotels. And I was already thinking about making that exact road trip, which I had already done once before 4 years prior. When I told her all of that she was interested but very skeptical. She told me she only half believed me. I was skeptical, too. A few days on the road with someone can turn into a nightmare if you can't connect and have fun together. For all either of us knew the other was totally crazy, so our second date I brought a couple maps and a plan. This was apparently sexy and impressive. This seemed to reassure her and we discussed our hypothetical road trip. We planned on where we would camp and sightsee and we decided to do it in 5 days. A pretty leisurely pace. After working out the logistics we were both feeling better about the idea, but still unsure. I store my travel trailer on a ranch in the hill country, about a 2-hour drive from where I live, so I suggested that we drive out there, stay a night, and drive back, as a trial run. If all goes well then we would leave a day later and split the travel expenses. The trial run was brilliant and we were becoming pretty smitten with each other, so we said, F it. Let's travel across the country with someone I just met. The 5-day trip turned into 8 days. We had so much fun we didn't want to say goodbye. After she flew home we kept in touch almost daily for nearly a year. We still chat on occasion to check in with each other, and I have plans on getting an Australian road trip out of her one day. I met an Australian girl at a mutual friend's wedding. This girl was also traveling around the States and I joined her for a bit of it. She went to London to work a contract gig for 6 months and I went back to my seasonal chef job. We stayed in contact and decided to do some more travel when our jobs ended. Met up in the Middle East and saw many countries over 3 months. Back to work apart again and the next year did a big trip through Asia. One thing is certain, if you want to really get to know a person, do some long-term rough travel together in third world countries for a while. Eventually we just got tired of only meeting up in strange corners of the world and exploring them together. This May, we will have been married for 20 years. Picking up violin. I've been playing for almost 10 years and it got me a full ride to UCF. I'm way too high to handle that quotation mark placement. When I asked out my girlfriend, audibly said F it. Adopting a cat. She's my best buddy now. Joining my high school football team. Hate football, I just did it out of spite. Tell my best friend that I like him. He doesn't feel the same, but at least I still have my best friend. Me. Yeah, it's getting late. I should probably head back to the dorms. Her. Yeah, you're too much of a bitch to stay the night. Me. And that's how I lost my virginity. My comment on a porn site. Some of the most pleasant comment sections to be found on the internet. I once saw a comment on a video of a couple banging in the kitchen that spawned a conversation about the benefits of quartz countertops. Choosing to start grad school. Buying my first car. Last night. My elderly dog, Brigid, has been going downhill for months. We had been hanging on for a while, and truth be told, probably too long. Last night we came home from a quick trip to the grocery store, and she was laying on the ground, barely breathing. She started to seize, and I knew then that it was time. I held her in my arms while the emergency vet put her down. I've never cried so hard in my life. Today, I'm a goddamned wreck. I can't eat, or drink. I didn't sleep last night. I've been in a perpetual state of tears since she passed away. I feel like I didn't do right by her. I know it was for the best, but I've never had to put an animal down before, and she was literally the best dog I've ever known. We had her for almost 10 years. Next month would have been 10. We got her as an adult from a shelter. They waived her fee because she was going to be put down if no one adopted her. They were low-kill, but she'd been there for 6 months at the time. I loved that dog more than I love 90% of the humans in my life. I consider it a blessing that I got to know her. But Christ, this pain is terrible, and I don't know when it will stop, or if it will stop. And what's worse is the guilt. I tried to write up a rip obituary type thing in R Dogs because I wanted some advice from other people who had gone through it, but the automod deleted it because I put something other than just her name in the title. I gave up, because I can't rewrite all those memories over. I can barely think her name without bursting into tears. I don't think I'll ever own another dog. This is the end game, and I don't think I can ever go through this again. Eating escargot. I'm laying on a hospital gurney. My wife was sitting next to me. I'm in the ER of the hospital where I was listed for a heart transplant. But I'm there because my bowels were obstructed. I'm wearing my artificial heart batteries and computer strapped to my side. My spare batteries and spare computer controller in the black bag in my wife's lap. I'm very calm because I know what's wrong with me. I'll be admitted for a couple days. Put on a liquid diet and my intestines will get back to normal. However, being on an artificial heart requires that I go into the hospital for everything. Suddenly my main cardiologist pops his head into my room. "We have a donor," he says. I'm shocked, but elated. What are the chances that I'm there when the call comes in? Then he tells me, it's a high-risk donor. He died of a heroin overdose. No needles, he says. My wife looks at me. I think for a minute. My doctor says that he can't push me in any direction, but I have to decide really quickly. The hospital knows nothing else about this guy's life except that he is 25 years old, and died of a heroin overdose. Nothing more. I said, F it. I'm doing this. It was the 11th of January 14. Within about 6 hours, I had a new heart. No complications. No infections. No problems. I spent 16 days recovering, and I finally leave the hospital. After a couple weeks, I draft my thank you letter to my donor's family. I send it off through the New England Organ Bank via my hospital. About 2 weeks later I get a call from the social worker at my transplant hospital. My donor family wants to meet me. We talk on the phone, exchange email addresses, cry, and best of all, we make plans to meet. And I learn something while talking. My donor didn't die from a drug overdose. He fell and hit his head at work. The hospital that originally treated him thought it was a drug overdose only because he had shown up by ambulance unconscious in a city crippled by overdoses. It turns out that he didn't tell anyone in his family that he had hit his head at work. He didn't think it was a big deal. He ate dinner and went to bed. In the morning, his grandparents couldn't wake him because he was in a coma from a brain bleed. That hospital screwed up in a major way and reported his death as an overdose to the organ bank. The paperwork later corrected. But long after my transplant, I'm 5 years out now and doing great. I get together with my donor's family all the time. We hang out, do birthdays and holidays. We even get together just to talk about my donor. They are wonderful.